And thank you, Cosmin, Freya, and the Parasite team for really feeling me welcome here in Hong Kong. It's my first time. And for your availability and sense of organization, which is really remarkable. Today I would like to formulate an alternative to the problem of growth and speed. And I'm not presenting this as a model of any kind. It's just a very specific response to the cultural and political context that the Apple finds itself in. And also that the institution post-crisis finds itself in. In the 1942 album The Shooting Star, Tintin, together with his loyal animal friend Bobby, arrives on a meteorite floating on the ocean close to the North Pole. The meteorite was supposed to destroy Earth, but instead prompted a competitive yet adventurous quest for scientific innovation. Strange things start to happen on its surface, which radiates with supernatural powers. When Tintin eats his lunch and throws away the core of his apple, an enormous apple tree immediately pops up. A few moments later, a giant spider attacks our hero. Just in time, one of the colossal apples dangling from the tree falls down and crushes the spider, saving Tintin. But this victory is only temporary. Soon after, the fearless Belgian reporter gets knocked unconscious by another oversized wallowing apple, which brings him and Bobby in serious trouble. That is just to say, bigger is not always better. As a matter of fact, in some cases, becoming too big might become life-threateningly dangerous, and thus it requires immediate, affectionate action. In The Shooting Star, Bobby needs to be super inventive to come up with a solution to the precarious situation they are in. He needs to find a way to take care of his human friend Tintin and prevent him from dying. I think of the Apple, the institution I became the director of in August 2016, in similar terms. The moment I arrived at the organization, it had become too big. The consecutive crushing down and ensuing crisis had already happened. Some people, let's call them patriarchal funders, had wanted its dead. Others, including myself, believed in a workable future for the organization, albeit in a resolutely different way. The apple could not and should not become bigger. It should become smaller, which is totally fine, by the way.
I'll tell you, their size, that backyard is like 10 miles. Giant blades of grass, huge insects. It's a jungle out there.
They're gonna head right for the house.
Yeah, you're probably right. Just gotta keep our eyes open.
Cheerios, the one with oat bran.
Okay, in the 1989 film Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, by the way, this was, I didn't find the original scene from the film, but this was the version which ended up in the Cheerio commercial, which is slightly different than the film version. In the film version, the father, the mad scientist, the patriarchal figure, doesn't eat his offspring. Anyway, mad scientist, the patriarch, shrinks his own offspring. The reality of becoming smaller as experienced by his children is an unmistakably scary and painful process, but it simultaneously also allows them to have the time of their lives. It's one big adventure. Which brings me to the apple. Despite its renowned, sometimes even self-mythologizing history, never stands still. It is an organization on the move. To paraphrase Woody Allen, and maybe it's not the best person to paraphrase these days, but anyway. An art organization is a bit like a shark. If it doesn't move, it dies. Whisper number 1, via Maaike Gouwenberg. In the past, the Appel often had a performative focus, with lots of attention for young, emerging artists. Later on, its focus shifted towards strong author-oriented exhibitions that also gave room to highlighting more established artists. And then there is, of course, the institution as the internationally renowned curatorial program, with which it continuously renews itself by following and oftentimes defining the latest developments in curatorial practices. One could claim that the institution never got rid of her original performative background. Just as a side note, the Appel was started in 1975 by Wie Smalls as a space for performance art. The Appel continuously performs itself. It makes of its own institutional framework an uninterrupted performance of always being on the move. And this was the first project I organized at the Appel in November 2016. It was called the Appel Timeline, 40 plus years of risks, which was an exhibition, a hybrid exhibition format, which is more like a continuous performance taking place in the previous building of the Appel as a kind of goodbye to a period. Throughout the exhibition period, a team of 3 curators, installers, workers at the museum presented the entire history of the institution. So they presented over 20,000 events that the Appel organized since its inception in 1974. I'm switching between those 2 dates, 1974 and 75, because there is a difference between the establishment of the organization, the Stichting, the Appel, and their activities. So currently the Appel moves more than ever before. Rather than mimicking the predatory movement of the earlier mentioned shark, it is decisive yet slow navigating of the rapidly changing political and societal contexts it is inevitably part of. The Appel is an institution that walks. Not the adventurous, deviating stroll of the situationist dérive, but walking as the consciously and determinedly navigating of different points in a line. This walking along points in lines, is marked by making connections with the lines of others. This way, networks of institutional relativity, of movement, of connectivity are slowly yet decisively explored. But how should one understand this walking of the institution? First and foremost, it is a walking against the flow of the very specific political, cultural, and societal context in which the institution finds itself. This is an image from a project that the Appel Curatorial Program organized at our new location in Amsterdam New West in April of last year, called Why is Everybody Being So Nice, which was an event of 4 days, which ended in a collective sleepover in our premises. And here it's becoming light again after a very long night. This flow gets increasingly determined by a capitalist articulated growth scenario, which ultimately demands always more visitors, always more programs, always more diversity, always more. And of course, always with less money, and preferably always faster. Whisper number 2, via de Zaak Nu. People talk about the slow burn. We are familiar with the phenomenon from slapsticks and cartoons. Roadrunner speeds across the road, suddenly hovers above a cliff, and only when he looks down he realizes it is already too late and crashes down. The insight that reality has drastically changed always comes with a delay. Walking as an institution, rather than being a means to getting around, is an act of consciously slowing down the dictate of growth and speed. To walk gives the institution the time to think about and act towards the things it finds most valuable and important. This always happens in dialogue with and while participating in the world of which it is inevitably part of. It is a thinking at 5.5 kilometers per hour, to paraphrase writer Rebecca Solnit, who claims that proper thinking happens at the same speed as walking. Only when slowing down, the institution can act with reason and strength. Walking thus becomes a slowing down mechanism that unsettles the omnipresent notions of growth and speed, giving the institution the mental space and time to act proactively when it matters. The question then is not so much how to produce more with less money, which is, let's agree, a tiring and old story, but how to take in a position towards a changing financial, societal, and political reality, which is valuable on its own terms. And here value would need to get reformulated as a constitutive factor in an open and caring society. Value as something that requires radically new ways of being in the world that can reclaim it from the logic of capital. That is the potential of the institution that walks. It presents a pragmatic, realistic alternative for the crushing logic of capital, one that truly functions as a kind of living example. March 2017. The Appel walks from downtown Amsterdam to the periphery of the city. It finds a new home in Amsterdam Nieuw-West, a predominantly working-class migrant neighborhood in the outskirts of Amsterdam. The institution has also become significantly smaller. Becoming smaller, as in Gilles Deleuze's Becoming Minor, can be defined as the vehemently demanding of a new ideological position that brushes against the grain of capital's logic of growth and development. Walking along the periphery, the Appel explores some of these new opportunities. Following severe austerity measures in the Netherlands, which fiercely decimated the cultural field, as well as privatized healthcare, childcare, and care for the elderly, among many other things, the notions of taking care and value, which should be a primordial essence of cultural workers globally, suddenly become potent, offsetting political categories. And thus the Appel positions itself towards a society that predominantly dashed the welfare system. It wants to reclaim space and time for a right variety of artistic, societal, and critical voices that find no home in today's thriving, consensual dissensus culture. On a side note, this walking across along the periphery is by all means relative. The Appel's artistic program is predominantly internationally focused, including partnerships with the Center for Art, Design, and Visual Culture in Baltimore, SICUS in Sevilla, and Alternativa in Gdansk, among many others, and alliances with a variety of organizations in the city of Amsterdam, such as the School nightclub, the University of Amsterdam, and the Red Light Radio online radio station. And here we see an image of Busy Days with Christine Sung Kim, which was an exhibition project. I always promised myself to never call it an exhibition, but each time I say exhibition project, so it was a project, a series of interventions, that's how I called it properly, throughout Amsterdam. And this was at the School, which is a nightclub. So it's also a restaurant and a fitness club during the day. So during the day, it was visited by visitors of the restaurant and of the fitness club, and during the night by vampires. And it was our most visited exhibition ever. We had 9,000 visitors, over 9,000 visitors. clubbers. The Apple Archive sets up partnerships with Documenta 14 in Athens and Kassel and with Musea Jumex in Mexico City, while the Apple curatorial program is part of an international consortium consisting of renowned curatorial educational platforms such as CCS Bard College, Goldsmiths University of London, Central St. Martin, Valant Academy, and Beton Salon, a partnership sponsored by Luma Foundation in Arles. Yet, simultaneously, the Apple also becomes more and more entwined with its new neighborhood, Amsterdam Nieuw-West. It is a local reality from which globally resonating issues related to capital's logic resonate forcefully. Whisper number 3, via the mission statement. The Apple is an experimental organization for contemporary art and its surrounding worlds. The Apple brings together people, objects, and ideas to explore the yet unknown. The Apple serves the intellectually and emotionally curious specialized art enthusiasts. The Apple explores the boundaries between artistic, discursive, and educational disciplines. Operating from Nieuw-West, the Apple's main activities are translated into a new open organizational vision for the institution, which circles around its 3 well-known programmatic nuclei, being its artistic program, its archive, and its curatorial program. This is an exhibition shot from our latest exhibition called To Remember Sometimes You Need Different Archaeological Tools, which is a project that we organized together with Hiwa K. And this really emerged from a very remarkable story. Hiwa knows this person called K, which is a fictive character he often quotes, who was attacked in Amsterdam Nieuw-West in 2001 by 4 people and abandoned for dead on the streets with several knife wounds in his body. And they left K with a perforated lung. So the project, which we organized with Hiwa, Hiwa wanted to look for those 4 people that had attacked K. And this became really kind of like the start for a search of Hiwa in our new neighborhood, because as it turned out, the incident happened about 500 meters from the new location of the Apple. The Apple that walks listens to new stories. These are the stories of people that previously might not have been involved with the institution, and who are largely left behind by the dynamics of capital. Neighbors, neighborhood schools, and neighborhood organizations in a predominantly migrant working class context. This has led the Apple to choose for radically new communication and education strategies. And here, I thought it was quite remarkable non-event that the Apple organized. I just invited people to have a walk in our neighborhood. The Apple developed, sorry, is there some water here? Ah, great. It was not so much a non-event as I was actually walking to the school where it all ended in a night-long party. So, the Apple, where was I? Okay. The Apple develops new ways to critically negotiate between artists and visitors, between new art and new audiences. This is a decisively slow practice focused on quality instead of quantity, and for which the adhering to visitor number quotas, which are more often than not prescribed by governmental funding institutions, is no longer a priority. Whisper number 4, via Hiwake. Today I notice a lot of refined language in contemporary art, and when you read a text, only people in the art world can get it. There is a huge distance between the art world and the world outside. And that's why someone like Trump wins, because he reaches people who are left behind by all the others. I believe artists should use a language that can be understood by large audiences. Otherwise, we are an all too easy target for populists. When people do not understand my work, it is not their but my problem. The Apple newsletter, for example, has become an animated letter by the director of the institution. Each month, the letter addresses its readers in an engaged and accessible way. It tells its readers something about the project the Apple is currently involved with, how they came about, and what the institution wants to achieve with it. The tone of these letters is open and inviting. They are written with the intention to directly involve its readers with the activities of the organization. But these letters also suggest more. They cultivate a deep kinship, a secret partnership in the strangeness of knowing. The Apple invites people to share in this strangeness of knowing. It is a place where knowledge gets presented as a field of possibilities instead of a position from which to speak. This, of course, does not imply a letting go of expertise for straightforward anti-intellectualism. It implies that both knowing and not knowing are key for the Apple. The walking institution moves away from an archaic model of all-knowing knowledge and information specialist and develops new strategies to engage its visitors. The days of passively showing and looking at art are far behind us. Walking, then, is not so much an oppositional positioning against the logic of capital. On the contrary, it moves bilaterally in between some of capital's most harsh effects, offering a kind of non-oppositional dissent. The Apple did not arrive as a displaced contemporary art spaceship in its new environment. Walking from downtown Amsterdam to the city's periphery, the Apple is undoubtedly part of an aggressive gentrification process, which increasingly defines the everyday reality of Amsterdam Nieuw-West. By upgrading old, often derelict buildings, such as the one the Apple finds itself in, this neighborhood, as many other peripheral ones in Amsterdam, such as the Noord and Bijlmer areas, gets rapidly prepared for decent people, being new, better off, mostly white inhabitants. Despite being part of these relentless developments, the Apple hopes to positively contribute to the social dynamic of Amsterdam Nieuw-West. Whisper number 5, via a neighborhood school. It is rare for students to get in touch with contemporary art in Amsterdam Nieuw-West. They only do when we go to the downtown area. Therefore, I was so happy when I found out that the Apple is moving to our neighborhood. The Apple finds inspiration in some of the desires of the neighborhood, which it learned from ongoing conversations with local organizations. The shaping of new communities, the definition of public space and equal rights. The Apple launches innovative school initiatives that are closely related to its artistic program or the unintended collection of its archive. And I'm saying here unintended collection because when I became the director of the Apple and I started to talk about the collection of the Apple, people started to attack me in public saying, how is that possible? You are a presentation institution and you have a collection. So it's an unintended collection. In the course of its 40 years existence, we have accumulated more than 200 artworks, which are gifts by artists, things that have been left behind, or things that our archivist has found on the floor. With the new development, or with the development of the ensemble of memories, an educational initiative that links contemporary artworks to everyday experiences, the institution wishes to involve diverse communities habitually excluded from the discourses of art in a new experimental discursive program. Whisper number 6, via John Berger. Any general culture acts as a mirror which enables the individual to recognize her or himself. The culturally deprived have far fewer ways of recognizing themselves. A great deal of their experience, especially emotional and introspective experience, has to remain unnamed for them. Their chief means of self-expression is consequently through action. This false view saves us from thinking about the extraordinary complex convergence of philosophical traditions, feelings, half-realized ideas, atavistic instincts, imaginative intimations, which lie behind the simplest hope or disappointment of each person. This is the continuous performance of the apple at the periphery. It creates a welcome temporal rupture in the by definition corrupt mythology of capital's relentless growth and speed scenarios. Instead of an institution with walls, it is an institution that walks, an open, horizontal place for hope, creativity, and magic. The apple as a radical community in the making for a neighborhood that is radically transforming. Always on the move, the internationally renowned art institution anchors itself in Amsterdam New West and thus creates a new identity and new reputation for itself. It is a reputation characterized by openness and social and political responsibility, by showing care in a predominantly careless society, and by redefining value in relation to defunct capital. The apple that walks makes connections with the world, with the city, and with her neighborhood. Why don't you join our walk? Thank you.